One of the things that I've heard from my guide Chardon and from others about like why we come back here is that because of the density here, because of the restrictions, the constraints on this planet, like pushing water through this tight funnel, right? And what happens when you put something under pressure is it shoots through and it can create a powerful stream that can create change. This is one of the most powerful places because it is so dense in various ways. The lows are pretty low, but the highs are very high. If you want to change, you'll want to go someplace where there's pressure on something that will help create that change. My name is Jo Burkhard, and here at the Reiki Center, I am one of the Reiki masters. I do cranial sacral therapy as well as guided release. But probably one of the things that I am most well known for here is being a channeler. So those are parts of the persona or what I do in today's world. But some of the things that I have done in the past, I have been an academician for several decades. So I've been on faculty at various institutions. I started out as a veterinarian, went then further into my education and became a scientist and a clinical pathologist. So we're the group that gets, like if the horse has got a colic and you want to know what does that look like, or dog's got a lump and you're trying to figure out if it's cancer or not, we're the group that would get all of those sorts of things and look at them. My research that I did was very focused on immunology, primarily immunology like of the mucosal systems, the guts, for example. And so I'm really heavily into what people might call all of this left brain analytical stuff. If you think about research and data and analysis and pathology and veterinary medicine and all of the things that you would need to know and be able to think about and learn, they all really focus a lot on your left brain. So that would have been my more prior history, and then I spent just around a decade being an administrator within the veterinary profession. So on faculty I was an associate dean and helped to support faculty in various roles in that. So I come at it from a lot of that left brain, and one of the things that people will ask me frequently is, how did you get here, right? How did you get to doing Reiki and all of the things associated with that? And how do you reconcile those in your brain? And so to talk about that, I probably need to go back a little bit more to my childhood and tell you where I really started, which I'm the adult child of two alcoholics who were Marines who were heavily Catholic. So I grew up in like a little bit of a challenging, dysfunctional childhood, very needing to always look around me, what's happening, be vigilant, pay attention. And I think that's part of where some of the high sensitivity and the intuition first developed, because in that area, when you are needing to pay attention to what's happening in your world and you're 4 or 5 or 6, you really don't have a lot of other tools or resources, and you end up leaning onto very much paying sharp attention and noticing, which is a super segue into intuition, because intuition is just really the ability of the other part of our brain, this right hemisphere of our brain and our third eye, this part, to be able to take in other information, analyze it, and come up with other impressions. Call that intuition. So, you know, I had a fairly Catholic upbringing. I went to Catholic grade school. I went into a school that we had church every day of the week, and yes, we had church every day of the week. And so, you know, it was very spiritual in certain ways. A lot of the church itself didn't resonate as much as things like the mysteries, the miracles, what people would call the Holy Spirit if you're familiar with Catholicism. So those were all things that always seemed to spoke to me, learning about the miracles that were associated in parts of the world and thinking they were real and they could happen, even though I wasn't seeing them in my life at that point, understanding that there was things that were really outside of what I could understand, and that I believed them from a very young age. So kind of fast forward, and I end up in junior high and high school, and by this time we've moved, and I'm no longer in Catholic school, but I am still very Catholic. Right? All of the aspects of Catholicism, I actually didn't leave Catholicism until I went into private practice. So I had done all of my my high school, my college, my veterinary degree. So I stayed with Catholicism long after leaving home and moving out. My background at that point, moving into junior high and high school, was to really just focus on what would get me approval, what would get me achievement. So I became super goal focused. Again, that led me down into biology. It led me into the sciences and understanding those sorts of questions. And that's where I started out that part of my life. So I finished out veterinary school and went to private practice and loved that for a good number of years, and then went back to a residency and PhD. And it was there that the lid sort of started coming off on some of the things that I try to keep in a little box and keep corked up. So I had always known things. You know, as a young child, I knew when somebody died. I knew who would be on the phone at times. Right, these are back in the old days of cell phones, so you've got the wall connection and the long cord, but you'd know who was calling at certain times. And so I knew things between people that I really shouldn't have known. So just always had that sense of that. But I also noticed things around me. So I had begun to really notice a pattern, for example, that lights would go on or off around me, and electrical things would start to change. And when I was in graduate school in my residency, there was a group of us that would go out a lot. So we would go out to the bars, we would go out to hang out, we would just go out and do things. And I really didn't talk about things until I had a little bit of alcohol. And then that zipper started to open up and things began to occasionally pop out. So one day we are walking from wherever we've been to someplace else, and we're walking down the street, and a light just goes out right above us. And somebody in our group says, "That's really strange." And I said, "No, it happens all the time." And just kept walking. And nobody was walking with me. So, like, what? They're like, "That is really strange." Yeah, no, it's not really. It just, okay. So I'm pegged, or I'm beginning to be pegged for being just sort of a little bit different, or maybe a lot different. When I got into my research laboratory, there was a piece of equipment that's called a spectrophotometer. And nowadays they're about this big. In those days, they were tabletop and huge. We would use them to measure the amount of DNA we were getting out of cells. This assay is so simple, like you can teach high school students how to do it, and I couldn't get it right. I could not get it right. I was getting the wrong answers for things that were known. I couldn't repeat things. And my lab mates were just saying, "Come on, Burkhard, how hard can this be? It's not that hard. Like, it seems to be really hard." I'm not getting it. So my office mate said, "Okay, fine. I'm just going to watch you every step of the way." So, she volunteered a couple of hours just to micromanage me and sit there and watch every step that I was doing. As I said, it's a really simple assay. You can't screw it up. So we get to the last step, to me putting in the cuvette into the spectrophotometer to get the answer out of it. Go up and I put it in and start to move, and the numbers on the spectrophotometer went brrr. And she looked at me and she said, "Step away." And so I did, and they went brrr. And she said, "Step up by it again." And I went, "Okay." I stepped up and they went brrr. And she said, "Step away," and they went brrr. And she looked at me and said, "I'll run your samples for you." Like, that was it. No question, no nothing, just, okay, I don't know what's happening. I couldn't wear watches at that time in my life. I would just burn through them and nothing flat. Couldn't wear, lots of electrical stuff would go around. So all of these things were happening, but I was also then beginning to get information in different ways. Like I said, I would always know things. I would have these hunches or I'd have information, but they became much more obvious. So one of the things that happened in my graduate program is I had this idea about how something would work. And I was trying to convince my advisor of it. And we were going kind of back and forth. And he said, I don't know, you have to prove it to me some way. Like this isn't just a hypothesis that everybody's going to accept. So how can you demonstrate this? And I couldn't come up with a good way to do it. And I was really wrestling with it. And I woke up one morning and I had had a dream in the middle of the night where I had laid out the whole experiment, the controls, all the things you had to do, every step. In the dream, I could see it. It was all written out on pieces of paper. And I was like, yes. And then you know how it is with dreams where you kind of wake up and it's like, no, come back. Where's my part? But I thought, okay, it's in here somewhere. So it's going to come back out. So it's okay, right? And I went to go eat breakfast and I come to the table and there's a pad of paper. And it wasn't a dream. I had gotten up in the middle of the night and had had some download and wrote all of this out and had no idea of it. It worked. It was great. It was such an interesting thing. And people were like, how did you figure that out? Well, it kind of came to me in a dream, right? I mean, how do you explain that? I didn't have enough language, but I knew that this wasn't how everybody else was getting their answers. I wrote a grant once on an airline trip. I sat down, I have motion illness, so I had taken some Dramamine, drifted off to sleep, apparently pulled out my laptop in that process and downloaded an entire grant and wrote it. Didn't have to do a lot of polishing afterwards, it just came out. So scientifically, I was getting answers. And people will say, yeah, but how does this part of your brain and this part of your brain come together? That's one way that it happens. And a lot of the folks that I work with, they come to me and they will be scientists, they will be nurses, counselors, therapists, some physicians, some veterinarians. So they have that science background. They are also getting information and don't know what to do with it. It doesn't fit in. How do you talk about it with your colleagues? So when I left my PhD and residency, I went and started on faculty at North Carolina State and then came back up to Ohio State. I'm originally from California. I had done my veterinary degree in practice in Michigan and then Indiana, so family and other things in this area. So in North Carolina, didn't have so much of intuition stepping in. I had a lot of areas in me and in my marriage that we were struggling with. I was struggling with some health stuff. We were struggling with our relationship and how things would land. When we moved up to Ohio, those things continued. And in beginning to kind of look to how we might work on the two of us, we ended up in not a Catholic church, but in a pretty strong charismatic evangelical church. So evangelicals are the folks that will try to convince you that you should convert, right? Here's the reasons, and sometimes they'll be on the corners with the signs. So that would be the evangelical approach. And then charismatics are those folks who very much connect to the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. And they might be the folks that you see that are raising their hands up there, praying in the Spirit, falling over, talking in tongues or praying in tongues, all of those things. I landed headfirst, like total immersion in this church. And we also had classes in this church on how to hear from God, how to give prophetic words, how to put your hands on people, pray, expect to see miracles and see things happen, how you could help folks get rid of their, we called it demonic energy, but negative things that were attached or associated with them. So that was kind of part of my my introduction into that there was language around what was happening that I was experiencing or feeling. It goes way back to when I was a little kid reading about miracles, thinking they must happen and people know about them. How can you make them happen? How can these happen? What was for me beautiful about that is I'm an academician. So we had classes about it. And I actually started to help teach some of those classes. And so here I am, a very left-brain person, teaching classes on how you will pray and see things, or listen and hear things, or cast out demons and do all of that. Now, for the longest time, I have this academic career. And I have this, what is happening career, right? And they never crossed. They were like this, two parallel paths in my life. That, along with some of the other health stuff I'd had in the past, began to create a huge dissonance and collision of things within me. So I had moral conundrums. There's part of the tension and the stress of always having to keep part of yourself hidden, not being able to allow people to know the real you, be watchful of what you were talking about. And I know many people navigate these in various ways, but for me, it really began to eat me up. And I realized I needed to let some parts of my life shift and change. So I began to let some of the science that I was doing changed and moved more into some teaching and other roles. But also along the healing journey, I began to get involved in Tai Chi and Qigong, another version of energy. So lots of people do Tai Chi and Qigong for the balance and the physical aspects. And I landed with an instructor who did all of those things, but also when you would watch Lucy Bartimol with Shift with Lucy, when you would watch Lucy move and do something, it looked like she was moving something with her hands, like she was seeing something there that we weren't. Some of us would sit, watch, trying to figure out what it was. And she'd say, it's just energy. It's just energy. And it's just your hands contacting the energy that's right around you that anybody can feel. And of course, most of us like, I'm not feeling anything, right? So I do remember the very first day that I'm in the middle of a form and there's this part where your hands come and settle onto something. And I did that and I literally felt my hands just rest. I didn't have to hold them up. They were sitting on something. I'm thinking, I don't know how to explain that. But there it was, feeling it for myself, and began to make some of the connections with the different parts that I was feeling in that area, the things that I'd experienced back in the church, and trying to tie those together. Now, along the way with the healing for me, I was also getting to work with a lot of physical therapists and occupational therapists. I'd had some weird post-surgical complications, and they just jacked up my nervous system in not helpful ways. And working with the traditional medical world wasn't being helpful anymore. And I'm a fan of traditional medicine. I do that sort of stuff on a regular basis. I'm a firm believer in all of that. And yet here I was faced with what I had studied and believed in wasn't holding me up anymore. And in doing those sessions, as physical and occupational therapists are working with me, they're asking me, what do you feel? What do you notice? And as I was talking about what I was feeling and noticing, they would often say, unsolicited, you're very sensitive. You seem to notice a lot. Have you thought about going into Reiki? You should go get Reiki session. You might be a great Reiki practitioner. And I'm going, I don't do Reiki. Okay, so Reiki isn't well thought of in the Catholic world from a very traditional structure. Lots of people will do it, and there's reasons that it's not thought of well. It has to do with some of the hierarchy, and the nuns had started to do some healing touch work, and it began to kind of empower the nuns in certain ways to be more independent in the church, being a very traditional hierarchy. It really wasn't very appreciative of that. So that's part of why Reiki is so blacklisted within the Catholic Church. But it was also very blacklisted in the evangelical church. And it was thought to be like working with the dark side, working with the dark energy. And so I was like, I don't do that. But it kept coming up. And so I do remember, the last person who said, really, you should check out Reiki. And I thought, it keeps coming up. And I tend to trust when things keep coming up, these synchronicities, serendipity that show up in your life. They've guided me all my life. And so I went, okay, fine. So I went to my Tai Chi instructor and said, you probably know people who do this sort of stuff. And I trust you. So who do you trust that you think I would trust? And she said, Linda Haley at the Reiki Center. So with a lot of trepidation, I scheduled this time with Linda at the Reiki Center. I was probably her last appointment in the evening. I do know that because this appointment went on like for an extended period of time as she tried to crack this nut, who sat in the chair, arms crossed, body rigid, just like, I'm not going to give you an inch in this conversation. And she's talking about, all sorts of things around Reiki and why it can be helpful. And then she starts to try to appeal to my educator side of me. And she talks about the training that you have to do to become a Reiki master. And inside of me, there's this little voice going, this kind of dialogue. And at one point it says, you paid good money for this. You might want to try to enjoy it. I'm like, just be quiet. Boom. So on she goes talking more about this. And she's talking about the Reiki master training. I'm like, who really cares about Reiki master training? And this little voice said, you're going to become a Reiki master. And if you can say, like, everything dissolved in a moment, because I've heard this voice before, I've been guided by this voice before. It came with just a stark realization right in that moment that the only way that voice was going to leave me alone was if I became a Reiki master. So my thought became, well, what's the fastest way now to become a Reiki master? I haven't even gotten off the table. I haven't even gotten on the table, but I realized I'm just going to need to move through this and just get this completed. And then I can go back to my life as it was, and whatever else is happening. That's not how it worked. Reiki session became Reiki 1. So I had my first Reiki session in August of 2018. In October of 2018, I'm in Reiki 1. In January of 2019, I'm in Reiki 2. And in Reiki 2, I have an existential crisis. I had some existential crises in Reiki 1 as well. You talk about the kind of the religious connection. So I came home from Reiki 1, the training part, and my husband said, well, how was it? What'd you learn? What'd you do? And I said, so everybody's around this table, this massage table that somebody's on, and we all sort of put your hands in various areas, and you're just waiting, you're seeing what will happen, you're allowing something to happen. And he said, kind of like in the church? Like, yeah. I said, and then people were hearing stuff. They were saying, I got this message, I got this, and they were giving it to the person on the table. And he said, kind of like in the church? I said, yep. And then I had a spirit attachment that was released in the class. And so I described that to him, and he said, what are these spirit attachments? I said, they're kind of like what we might have called demonic. And how did it feel it was released? Kind of the same, sort of like the church. I'm like, it's exactly the same. It is, in my feeling of it all, it's exactly the same, just different words and language on it. So that shook me a lot to realize that maybe some of the things that I had been so biased against in my religious journey, so self-righteous about, some of the things that I helped break off of people or put a judgment on them around, that I probably hurt people. And that started to unravel me to some degree. In Reiki 2, my existential crisis was exceedingly personal. I had never believed in anything except this life is your life. You got this life, and when you're done, you're done. So make it your best life. And I'd always just worked in that way, operated in that way. I've always felt and believed there's something really big beyond us. It's something mysterious in the universe, but this life is all you get. Well, when you're around people at the Reiki Center, they have different opinions, and many of them have very strong opinions about the fact that we have other lives. Many people call them past lives, things that have happened, that we've had this soul journey that we've been on. And so Linda Haley and I, the director of the Reiki Center, would have these ongoing discussions at points, and like, nope, there's no way you can prove it. And there's lots of evidence that we're here in this life. I mean, how can you say we come back? Where is the proof of that? And she would show me some things, and I said, I can go out and find you just as many references and scientific or quasi-scientific things that don't do it. I said, I'm just probably going to have an experience of my own, and I don't see a way to have that this side of death. Therefore, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And she said, you can agree to disagree, but you're just wrong. So I was like, okay, fine. So I get to Reiki 2. And day 1 went interestingly. Day 2, there was a meditation in the morning that took me way outside of my body. And I felt like I was getting downloads and seeing things. And I should just, by another point, I do not see things in my mind. I have something that's called aphantasia, so there's no images there. So for me in a meditation, to be seeing things and connecting with imagery was very weird. And that didn't help with the discomfort that this meditation that meant to get really deep at some things in you was happening. After the meditation, I ended up curled up on the floor of the classroom in fetal position, crying my eyes out, to the point that some other student just took me and like kind of mommed me, right? Held me and said, it's okay. This is this left brain, incredibly successful professional academician curled up on the floor crying, because whatever this is messing up something really deep inside of me. I had my attunement. That didn't help. After lunch, I couldn't barely eat lunch. I just said, I'm done. I'm gonna go sit in the studio. I took some crystals and thought, I'm just sit, I'm going to meditate. I just need to calm down or see what's going to happen. And Linda came and gave me some different crystals, and I shouldn't have accepted those. So, right, I get these different crystals. I'm like, I don't know. One of them was very grounding, and one was much more of a clear crystal quartz. And for whatever reason, I took that clear crystal quartz while I'm sitting down meditating, and I held it up to my third eye. And as I did that, somebody showed up next to me, like some being, and seriously, like that I could see. What? Okay, but it didn't freak me out that much. I think I was freaked out enough by everything at this stage. I'd just been undone. Okay, being, right? Get a name. Okay, fine. What are you here for? Let's go travel. So if you've probably heard of astral travel, it was a version of that. It felt like we picked up and flew through the galaxies and the stars and came to a planet. And I could see the planet as we came in, and there's this big old building, and it's sort of Greco-Roman white marble, all the pillars and everything else. Okay, like a big patios and all of that. That's so interesting. And we walk in, and there's a desk, and this being takes me to the desk, and I get a scroll. And I know that on the scroll, that's my purpose in there. And so I open it and I look at the symbols, and they're symbols, and I can't read them, but I remember the symbols. I have them written down, right? So I still occasionally look at them and think, I still don't know what you mean, but I feel like that's my purpose. That was the scroll was my purpose. And there was this book, a big book, a very big book. And on the cover, somehow said, Book of Lives, plural. And so I'm flipping through this. Okay, it's my book of lives, and I look at various ones, and spoiler alert, everybody dies in it. So I'm like, well, they die. I mean, I don't know what I expected, but everybody just died in the book. And I read the stories or the brief synopsis and like, okay, some I was a really not good person and some I was a good person, and that's sort of an interesting sort of thing. And I give the book and the scroll back and come back into the classroom, or sorry, back into the studio room where I am, and kind of come out of the meditation, grab a piece of paper and write the images down for the symbols that I'd seen. And okay, I thought that was just really weird. Was pretty calm about it all. Wasn't crying anymore. Like that was weird. Even for weird, that was pretty weird. So the group then is finished whatever they're doing, so they come in to do the table time work. And Linda looks at me and she said, "Do you want to be first on the table?" And I'm thinking, no, I do not want to be first on the table. But that look in her eyes was, you're going to be first on the table whether you like it or not. So I said, sure, fine, whatever. Because I wasn't in any shape to work on others. I knew that. Get on the table, and I've just come off all of this, and in this, I'm going deep. I've lost awareness of people working on me, and I'm in my heart, and there is one of those giant pirate treasure chests, you know, and it is filled with a bazillion little scraps of paper. And every single little scrap of paper has a belief on it. And I'm just looking through all of these beliefs, like, what, you know? I don't know about that, right? I'm thinking, I don't know how to sort through these. And then I realized I'm on session time and they're going to be ending soon. And what do? And I slam this lid shut and I pick up the chest and I take it over to this giant fire and I throw it on a fire. Burn it all up. Okay. They like close me out, and they tell me what they noticed. They ask me what I experienced, and I told them a little bit about it. And somebody says, "You burned up all your beliefs?" And the way she asked it, I was done. Okay, like if I was emotional before, I am now. I have lost every semblance of everything. I think, what have I done in my life? What have I screwed up? What have I changed in me? So that was an exceedingly dark existential crisis. And it was days of literally asking myself the goofiest of questions. I always get up every morning and have coffee for breakfast. Do I like coffee? I'm not sure I like coffee. Do I like coffee or not? That was the level of everything. When everything went, it was, do I like this clothes? I don't know. How am I supposed to operate in life? That really rocked me. And it also, I think, saved me, because it was around those points where I thought, I can't continue this parallel life anymore. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm just going to have to figure out how to bring parts of me, and I've got a bit more of an open canvas. I can create or play or do something different within that. But the universe wasn't quite done yet with big, massive changes in my life. So I redid Reiki 2 a month later, no existential crisis, made it through. And then went into what we call the internship. So in the internship, it's sort of a preparation for those who want to go on to become Reiki masters at some point. It's a 6-week program. And I had started to meditate and really do sort of that more deeper dive into mindfulness. Gotten some crystals, was meditating with those, and strange stuff was happening. But it wasn't out here strange stuff. It was something weird. It felt like something was moving in me, or something was shifting in me, like a live thing, like something was in me. Yeah. And my only construct for that was, it must be a demon. right? I knew it wasn't a spirit attachment. Like, it's in me. It's literally physically in me. It's called a demon. So I scheduled time on Linda Haley's table. And then she saw me at the internship and she's like, I'm seeing you every week. Why did you schedule time on my table? Something's going on. It's not good. I'm going to come in. I'm pretty sure it's a demon and you're going to get rid of it. And literally she just looks at me. She's like, it's not a demon. I said, I'm coming in. I'm pretty sure it's a demon and you're going to get rid of it. Like, it's not normal. It's very strange. I come in, I get on the table. She starts the Reiki session and it starts happening. And this voice starts trying to talk through me. And she said, it's not a demon. You're trying to channel. And I was not excited. I was angry. I was like, can you get rid of it? You can't get rid of this. I need you to get rid of this. And she said, some people think of this as a gift. And I'm back to my religious world thinking, no. Like, if Reiki is bad, channeling is, you must be talking directly to the devil. That was the only thing. That was all I knew. And even though I had had so many changes, these things still come forward that have been ingrained in your life forever. But channeling felt like coming home. Channeling felt like there was something in my heart that said, this is your soul's connection. You know this. You know you. And it felt peaceful. Once I figured out I didn't have a demon, it felt peaceful. My concern was, what would everybody else think? What was my family going to think? What was the people I work with going to think? What were the past church people going to think? What were the people, just everybody, like, we weren't going to talk about this forever. But I started practicing. I went home and I started practicing. I was also in a part of a group that we were working to help think about classes and what might be offerings here. We would oftentimes do some meditations, and this group would come up with their own questions too. And I would take all of these questions, put them on a sheet of paper or put them on my laptop, and I would just practice channeling and just see what answers would begin to come through. And I'd been doing that for just under a month and I call that kind of channeling doing the radio dial. I hadn't seen people channel before. I didn't know how to do it, but I would just type or write and information would come in, and it wasn't me. I didn't know the answers to these things. But I began to feel like there was somebody almost like knocking on the door saying, hi, I'm here to connect to you. And I couldn't make this connection. The harder I tried, the more it just slipped through my hands. It was like the trapeze thing where you're trying to make that connection, but all you're getting is fingertips and it's just slipping. And I was working with another guide and channeling at that point when I thought, I'm just going to ask him, who is this and why can't I connect? And he said, oh, that's Chardon. And I said, Chardon? And he said, yeah, Chardon. So why can't I connect to Chardon? And he said, well, you have fear. You're afraid of how your life is going to change if you step into this. And we go, criminy, of course. That's the same story as before, all the time. And so I was like, well, I would really like to meet Chardon. And I hear this little tiny voice say, hello. And this started the connection. I was like, hello? And they said, yes. Are you Chardon? Yes. What should I ask you? Ask for love. And to me, that's what channeling feels like. It's a frequency. It's a vibrational frequency. And it's the vibrational frequency of the harmonic love of the universe. Channeling's a higher energy than we walk around in. And it's a higher energy and frequency that is most often for us. Whether you listen to your soul, whether you listen to an archangel, whether you have an animal spirit guide, no matter what your beliefs are, you can connect in any way to something that is of higher wisdom than what we typically are swimming in the frequency. Particularly, you think about your news, think about your social media, very different sort of energy that is moving in that. And this energy is really focused on helping us on our own journey to whoever we're becoming, to connect deeper to the mystery or the magic of the universe or source or the divine, whatever you want to call it, and to help us perhaps be change in the world that we want to see. And so I started channeling Chardon, and this was an incredible relationship, and it continues. So I've been channeling Chardon for 6 years. They're a collective, and I publicly channel for them. I teach classes on this, and to me, everybody can channel. Everybody can hear or connect. Most people aren't going to channel Chardon or in that way, but we all can connect in different ways, whatever way feels right for us and that we're open to. I know lots of people who do it by writing. I know people who do it by dance. I know people who are musicians, and you ask them how they got that music, and like, I don't know, it just kind of flowed through me. I know some authors. How did you get that storyline? It just showed up, right? I woke up one morning and I had this whole idea for what this book could look like. All of those things are channeled energy. And I go back to what I was getting when I was in my PhD. They can help us solve real, literal questions. You know, they can be as, how do we bring more lightness and love into the world, to, what am I supposed to do here? I need some help solving this very practical issue and problem. And different guides come to us for different reasons. So there are some channels and guides that really heavily focus into like the geopolitical world or the science world. My stated goal when I started to channel was, I set the intention. I want to channel something that is going to help me be on the journey that I'm on and help me help other people, because I have always helped people in transformation and change and transition. So I've done coaching, become a coach, and one of my key areas is when people are making changes in their life, that liminal space, that transformative space. I love working in that space. And I thought, that's my sweet spot. So I want guides that are going to help me change for me and help others with that. And I also said, and I don't want to channel anybody that anybody else is channeling, because I have still all of these sort of people-pleasing imposter syndrome, much less now than before. But I knew that if I was channeling like Archangel Michael on a regular basis, I would be there trying to see what else are other people saying about Archangel Michael and what should I look at. So I just knew I needed to not channel any of those. And then along the way I learned really the names they give us are probably not the real names. They don't have names in the same way, and they'll just give you a name to give you a name at times. So yeah, there's always two questions that come up in the channeling classes. One is, am I just making it up? And the second is this question: what's the difference between being a medium, a channel, a psychic, being intuitive, and where and how do those overlap? So if you go to the very tightest definition, channeling is simply being a conduit bridge. You are bringing in or being a bridge for some sort of information, wisdom, or energy within that. Really similar to Reiki, right? The Reiki energy isn't mine or yours when I'm working on someone. It's the energy that flows through me. So I'm just being a bridge or a conduit for that. Within that kind of range of even that tight definition of channeling, being a bridge, there's a lot of things that will fall also into that. And then there's a very broad definition of channeling energy, which could include everything from intuition and astral travel, pendulum work, and lots of other things within that. Channeling being this connection oftentimes to something that is outside of us, whether it be another being, maybe it's Gaia, maybe it's, again, Archangel Michael, it's the ninth dimensional Pleiadians, it's the Council, it's many different spirit guides, right? You're connecting with something and getting that message and bringing that through. But it can also be your own soul, your own heart, your own higher consciousness. So you can channel things that really aren't out here, but are different facets of yourself. Mediumship can be a component of channeling or can use channeling. So as I said, my guide's name are Chardon. For me, they come in up here. They're up here right now, right? I can feel them. They're just hanging out. I can tell you what Chardon has to say. Or I can let them come into me, into my energy field, use my throat, my voice. I like to say it's like, here's this couch. I scooch over on the couch, I give them the microphone, they talk to you. Mediumship can do either of those. Most mediums are like this version. They are saying, I see this older gentleman, this is what he looks like, I'm getting the name Joe, and you say, yeah, it's my Uncle Joe. Here's what I'm hearing that Uncle Joe wants you to know. And they are relaying the message that they're hearing, which can come with some editing or interpretation. The best of mediums, just like the best of those who are hearing, tend to give the messages, here's exactly what I heard, saw, or felt, and then let some interpretations flow from that rather than interpreting or making assumptions from it right from the beginning. But mediums oftentimes will tell you, there's somebody here, I'm getting this message, and here's what it sounds like, or here's what they're saying. But some mediums do actually tap into that. The voice or the message will come directly from whoever has been passed. I am what I call an accidental medium. The mediums that I know and the people that teach mediumship just say, I shouldn't say that, I am a medium if I pick those things up. But the difference is, for me, if you walked in and said, I'd like to connect with Uncle Joe, and I look around and there's no, I get nothing, I can't make Uncle Joe show up, and I can't give you that reading. But then there's times we're just having a discussion, or I'm in session with somebody, and all of a sudden, like, there's something behind you, and so it's just randomly. To me, it feels very random, accidental. Whereas I can always tap into Chardon. I can always give you a message from them. Intuition is similar to those, and I oftentimes will intuitively give people reads which they think I must be hearing from my guides, but I'm just picking it up based on your energy field. And so, most people's energy fields come out about this far and around them. And so if I'm seated close to somebody, I can pick up from their energy field an awful lot of information if I choose. I choose mostly to not walk around with all those antennae on, because it's just overloaded and you pick up all the emotions and all of the stuff that people are carrying, and nobody needs that. At least Mary Jo does not need that. I do not need all of that extra energy in my life. But that intuition is really reading what's coming through in the energy field. That's how it works for me. But there are intuitives who don't need to tap really into the energy field. They are able to see, sense, or feel very slight differences in your temperature. They can see the flashes of something that go across your cheek. They see something move across the energy of the eye, like that slight eye flicker, or they can feel or sense your heartbeat has increased. So their physical antennae are super sensitive. And they aren't picking it up in that energetic sense that many people, when they talk about intuition, are picking up. Psychics kind of bridge a little bit of some of these that we've talked about. All psychics are very intuitive. Some psychics will also be channelers or mediums as well, because they're picking up things from others. And one of the things that often helps to distinguish psychics just a little bit more is they have some sense of foretelling. So again, knowing who's going to be on the phone when somebody calls. You think about somebody and you get a text message from them. And then there are people who are psychics who also pick up from, we're going to have an earthquake, or we're going to have a major disaster. Psychics have to sort through a lot of metaphor, as do people who are hearing these messages and then sharing them. So a lot of times, like earthquake can be that there's going to be an actual physical earthquake. Earthquake can also be you're going to have an existential crisis in Reiki too, and have your life and your foundation fall apart, right? And sorting through those things can be part of the challenge of picking up that information. So having to understand that the metaphor of pregnancy, maybe you're birthing a new project. The metaphor of running through an airport. What are you missing in your life that you keep failing to connect to, or what are you running from in your life? So it doesn't always translate directly into something that's going to show up in your lived life tomorrow. So those are kind of the major outlines of that. I think that anybody can channel. I really do. Will it look like how I channel with Chardon? Often not. And I don't channel with Chardon all of the same ways. And when I channel for myself, it's very different. The content is different, the topics are different, the feelings are different than when I'm channeling publicly. It's much more intimate. It's much more related, again, to me and my life. When I'm channeling for a group or publicly, it's about the audience. So can everybody channel, or are there only a few people who are set out to channel? Depends on how narrow your definition of channeling is. If it's hearing wisdom for yourself, sharing that wisdom with others in maybe smaller ways or more focused ways, then I think anybody can do that. To be someone who channels in a really public way, I'm not sure that everybody wants to step into that for the first, but I also know that Chardon and I have contracted in the past. This is part of my contract to work with them, and that we've been on a journey over some other lives as well. I didn't learn that by me asking Chardon. I got that because other people in the class, for example, or in the community of channelers, they ask Chardon questions, and then I get to learn things about myself in that way because I didn't go down those paths. Chardon is a collective of 11. The point person Chardon is always the same individual, and that person, that individual or being, has been incarnate in the past. They're part of my future consciousness. There are other beings within the collective that have been incarnate. There's some that haven't been. There's this interesting one that the energy shows up to me as being in a circle, and there's one that always sits right about here. Like, I don't know what this energy is, but it's just so very different than everything else in there. I do know that this energy of the circle changes, that it feels, and again, I learned this from other people asking Chardon this, that the collective is made up of 11, not always the same 11. They pull from about 111, which pulls from another 1111. I don't know how far it goes out, right? But there's sort of this, who's needed, who wants to tap in for that. They don't, it's not like they actually are showing up in a circle. They're not seated around a table. They're all ninth dimensional beings. whatever that means. So anything past seventh dimension typically means that they are not in physical form. So you are in a light body form from the seventh dimension on. There are about as many versions of people understanding dimensions as there are groups and people on this world. So there's a lot of different definitions of that. But most will agree that there's somewhere typically between like 11 to 15 to out to 30 or 40 dimensions that are present. We're in the third dimension, and we're in a very dense third dimension, right? Because we're in physical form. Fifth dimension is where we're headed. The fifth dimension would be still in physical form, but connected to each other and connected to source and the universe in a different way. So that understanding of oneness, that understanding of heart-based energy, the understanding of connection, and that we are all interconnected is probably the best term. I feel like I just used connected 3 times. So that we are all connected in different ways, meaning that when we move out of the concept that our body ends right here at the edge of our skin, that we are able to interact with the energy of each other. I talked about the intuitive energy, the heart-based energy. There's like groups that do heart meditations, and they gather sometimes in small numbers, sometimes in huge numbers, and they change the energy of a place or a situation because of the meditation. People who pray will say exactly the same thing. We gather together, we pray, and things change. There's something about that coming together that allows greater than just our parts, the number of our parts coming together. We think about connection in the fifth dimension as being sort of the end all for us at times. People will talk about awakening or the ascension process as sort of the shift or change that's happening in our world. Chardon has also talked to me about like that has actually part of the planetary changes. Our planet's changing. It's not just us changing on this world. We are changing, and as our planet changes, we get to go along with that, but we are changing as well to help build something that's different in our world. And it is so much around the heart. It is around the heart chakra, the heart energy, the energy of love and compassion. It focuses on how we come together to create versus me as my solo isolated person and how I think and create and achieve. That whole oneness concept applies to humans, but it also applies to how humans interface with our physical world, how we interface with our spiritual / soul world, and how we interface out with the dimensions. Back to a little bit of the question of like, where do the guides and helpers come from? Some people channel and have with them guide teams that are strongly angelic. Some, as I said, are very like animal guides. They oftentimes will have deep roots into earth-based either beliefs or religions and an honoring of the earth, and so their spirit guides and where they receive information from is oftentimes associated with the physicality of our world. There are some that connect to what people would call ETs or aliens or other things like that. One of the guides that I have channeled was a guide that was in physical form in the fifth dimension, someplace else. So a very ant sort of being. So I know, how do you make this stuff up? But it is the most fascinating, interesting sorts of things. Can you allow your imagination to come into play? I saw this beautiful quote at one point where we oftentimes ascribe imagination to imaginary friends in the genre of little kids. Like, they can imagine and adults can't imagine. But learning happens two ways, according to this quote. We can learn by education and we can learn by imagination. And when those two parts of our brain can come together, when we get the left part to dial down a little bit, the right part to come up a little bit, not saying this part doesn't matter at all. Right? We are not meant to dissociate and just not think and not be cognitive. We are meant to use our full brain. But people like me, this one has been on uber steroids for a really long time, and this one is having to catch up over time. I had to let go of understanding things when I was in the church, and I started to have, in that charismatic evangelical church, and I started to have the weirdest experiences I had ever had in my life up to that point. I now think I've had some that have been weirder, but there was really some weird stuff that happened, and you can't explain it. And people would just say, well, that's God, that's the Spirit, that's how that works. Okay, so my highly scientific brain could either argue or say, that's what it is, and I would just have to let it be. So I learned at that point to kind of accept that there are things that are bigger than me that I'm never going to understand. And I tend not to go down those rabbit paths of, I got to understand and figure all this out, and that's the only way I'm going to believe it. Because if you say, I will believe it when I see it, you will probably not see it. But if you say, I'll believe so I can see, take a chance and see what you see. So I feel energy, and I get that a lot when I work with cranial sacral therapy and I'm working with people. I get it when I'm doing Tai Chi and Qigong and I'm working through the moves of the energy. And I can sometimes, put my hands around things or around places. I don't know why I use my hands to do that. I can feel it with any part, but our hands tend to be the instruments by which we walk through the world and feel and sense things. So we'll describe that a lot as like, put your hand there to feel or sense, but it's not like these are the only antenna that we have in our body for pulling in energy. I also am somebody who's just claircognizant. I just know. I just know. I have no idea how, I just know. And there it is. It's like that person's gonna call. I just know. One of the things that I've heard from my guide Chardon and from others about like why we come back here is that because of the density here, because of the restrictions, the constraints on this planet, the third dimension, the third density, the not knowing that we're connected. So many of us grow up believing that we are disconnected from whatever is bigger than us and we have to make it on our own. The hardships and what we feel is the harshness, they are like pushing water through this tight funnel, right? And what happens when you put something under pressure is it shoots through and it can create a powerful stream that can create change. We do it because there's other places in the universe to do it, but this is one of the most powerful places because it is so dense in various ways. But it also has this huge range of physical experiences. And the beauty in this world is extremely beautiful. And the joy in this world is incredibly joyful. So the lows are pretty low, but the highs are very high. If you want to change, you could say, I'm gonna go float among the galaxies and I'll encounter some little bit of energy or something every once in a while, and I'm just gonna float and be there and just be very zen. But you won't change much. If you want to change, you'll want to go someplace where there's pressure on something that will help create that change. Now, along the way, apparently, as we go through different dimensions, there's different ways that those pressures or things happen, and the choices and options that we have can change. But the access granted to us because of the physicality of this world has some things that are very different. Earth is also a place that, from a galactic or cosmic perspective, has heart energy, emotional energy, love and compassion in ways that beings from other places don't have yet to access. And I said yet to access because apparently one of the things that our planet moving into its space in the universe in a different way opens up a currency, a ability to trade or barter or to use things for influence around heart energy, around emotional energy, because it's not available every place in the universe. So when I channel, my guides, named Chardon, usually hang out up here. I want to be really clear about this. Not everybody's guides hang out up here. One of the other guides that I channeled would hang out and just tap me on the shoulder here. Some will show up here. Sometimes people will feel or sense them right in front of them. Sometimes they'll feel them up through their crown. So for me saying they're up here doesn't mean that everybody's will be like that. And if yours aren't like that, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It just means they're different guides. You're a different person. The way you receive information is different as well. For me, when I pull out my crystal or set my intention to begin to channel, they're already hanging around. They're already set and ready to do this. It is literally just a matter of me kind of sliding over on this couch. It's mentally like there's a couch in there, I slide over. Sometimes I'm not paying attention to what's happening here. I might be looking over here doing something different. Usually I'm paying some attention to the words that come in. I'm still here. It's going to look like I'm in a bit of a trance. I'm going to take my glasses off. I'm going to close my eyes. And my face may look a little slack or something in there. But I'm still here. I can pop out of it at any moment if I need to. I'll pick up enough of the words. And particularly in a short one like this, I'm going to be paying attention because I'm curious what they have to say as well. I don't hear in advance. They're not up there saying, we're going to say this, or do this. They speak and it comes through me. And I'm going to say I see the words flow out. I don't really see, so I hear or sense what the words are. Sometimes I have a nanosecond of the word's going to look like this, or this is where they're headed. The first couple of seconds to sometimes up to 10 to 20 seconds, they are bridging and calibrating. So we are used to connecting to each other, but each time it's this getting the connection nice and tight so that I can be a conduit for this. I don't want to be putting my own interpretation or bringing my own energy into it. I want you to be able to hear from them. So I'm going to ask them to bring in a message related to all of the things that we've been talking about and see where they run with it. So. So greetings and welcome. We are Chardon. We welcome you as seekers, those who are seeking, even if you are not sure what you are seeking. The fact that you are interested in, intrigued by, and listening to this sort of material means that within you there is a resonance and a frequency that is associated with the information and the channeling energy that we are coming through with. You asked an important question. Why now? Why are people here? Why did you choose to come to this world, this life? Your planet is evolving, and you are evolving. Some of you call it the Ascension, some of you call it the shift. But within all of that, you understand that there is change and transformation that is present in the world, and you are here, and you came here at this time to be part of the change and transformation that is happening on this world. Even though there are many who will look at it and say, I'm looking around the world and there's no way I showed up for this. But you did. You did because you wanted to be part of the change. You did because you have contractual agreements, karmic associations, or you are part of some of the beginnings of what you see is now time to be transformed or changed in your world. Your planet is going through her own change, as we said. And your planet's change has to do with her place in the universe, in the galactic cosmos, and if you will have it, her place at the planetary systems that interact and connect with each other. Just as humans have a human grid where you are all somewhat able to connect to other energy, other people, it is a bit how your intuition and some of the information you receive works is through this human grid. Your planet also is part of a planetary grid, and she is emerging into a fuller space within that grid, greater connections with other planets, other star systems, other galaxies. There is a grid and a web within the planets. Your planet cannot not change. The sacred geometry of planetary alignment, your planet's own desire and shift, all of these come to this is the time. And your planet is changing. And you as humans, while you have marked influence on each other, have less influence on your planet than perhaps you think is true. Your planet will survive with or without you. But you need your planet. And so, as your planet changes, your choices to really go with the planetary changes and flow that are occurring. The question will be, what will your changes look like? How will you change? Will you decide to change, or will you try to hold on? And part of the reason you see so many who are awakening or shifting, entering into the ascension process, is because there is an energy throughout your world that is waking people up to the opportunity that you get to help to shape and change how humanity will look. Humanity itself is on a cusp. There is an opening, there is an opportunity for what many of you would call oneness, for what many of you would call interconnection, this heart-based energy, a currency and a change within you and within your world. Different ways of being. Much of your world is extremely doing-based. All of your markers of success are based around what did you do? How much did you accomplish? How long did it take you? How high was it? How fast was it? How big was it? But the measure that you are stepping into is how will you be? How will you be with your world, your planet? How will you be with each other? And most of all, how will you be with yourselves? How will you be with you? This is an opportunity and a chance for you to become more what you might call authentic, you might call whole. What you are doing is coming home to yourself. You're remembering who you came here to be. You are remembering the fragments and the parts of your stories that have all led you to this place. You are remembering why you emerged from this ocean of source to individualize, to bring something unique and different into the universe. And so the opportunity and the choice is at each human person. Will you begin the inward journey? Will you choose to allow yourself to change, to become, to shift? Or will you hold on more tightly to fear? Will you hold on more tightly to things that are breaking down, but you don't want to let go of those ruts or traditions or routines or patterns or comforts that you have held dear to you for so long? Not realizing that those are like the sandcastle in your backyard versus the ocean of opportunity. Humanity has been small. In part, it's been fed messaging and agendas to keep it small. But humanity has also embraced that because there has been a safety or a feeling of safety within remaining small. And you see this playing out in your everyday life, where many will not jump into what they feel their heart is calling them into. They won't risk. They stay small and feeling safe. And yet the greatest freedom and the greatest safety is in becoming who you came here to be, becoming and remembering who you are. Many of you at this time are thinking, how do we change our world? You change your world by changing you. And that seems very simplistic to many. So many will listen to that and say, there must be more. And there will be more. But the root of the change for everything is you. You changing your inner landscape, identifying for yourself, who are you? Why are you here? What do you value? Healing and addressing your shadows means that you shift your energy, your vibrational frequency, from one that is more dense, more negative, more fear-based or harming, to one that is a higher vibrational frequency, one that is lighter, one that is more open, one that is more connecting. And that changed you, that way of being. You take that changed you and that way of being everywhere you go. You take it to work, you take it to your family, you take it to the grocery store, you take it to school, you take it to the park, you take it while you're driving, you take it everywhere. And there is a convergence of energy that happens when the resonance begins to shift You can find it in groups, you can find it in large gatherings where there is a coherence that happens. And that coherence taps into the harmonic symphony of the universe. It is the song that runs through everything. And some will hear, some will feel, some will see, some will sense. But regardless of how you are able to detect it, when you land into that, when you find it, something comes alive in you. And it allows you to become more alive to your entire world. And that, dear ones, that is how you shift and change the world. And that is also why you are here in this time, in the body you are in, at the age you are in the part of the world you are in. Because you wished to be in what is happening in your world right now, at a time and a space that for you makes sense and supports your journey to becoming more of who you are finding yourself to be. And so with that, we wish you peace and joy upon this journey.